Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the status of the nation. Now, per usual, we're going to be rounding up some of the biggest stories that have been happening in the Republic, and this week I thought it would be a good idea to focus more on the political messaging that's been happening in this week. It's been a very strange week in terms of the media and the things that have just been put out there, and I realized that I think the most important thing when we discuss and we talk about the things that happen in the country is always to be honest in our critique and to discuss things for what they really are and not what they appear to be. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about is this picture of Cyril Ramaphosa that found its way to social media in the week. Now, this is the picture. Now, as you can see in the picture, Cyril Ramaphosa is talking to King Zwelithini and he is clearly kneeling before him. Now, the reason why this picture is incredibly awkward is that you have to take into consideration everything that's been happening between the ruling party, Cyril Ramaphosa, and King Zwelithini, particularly with regards to the conversation of land expropriation without compensation. Now, if you remember, in my previous Status of the Nation video, I talked about how there was a lot of drama and controversy surrounding the Ingonyama Trust and basically what was going to happen to the land in the trust around this conversation of land expropriation. Now, since this picture has come out, it's caused a lot of public drama and outcry where people are literally saying, look at this picture, you practically have the president groveling before the king. I mean, Mail and Guardian also had it on their front cover talking about bowing before the king. You'll also remember that last week we spoke about how the president basically reassured the king that the land that is in the trust will not be touched, and how he was going to go visit the king and meet with him and talk with him so they can discuss basically everything that's going on. So the issue here is that if you take this picture and you take everything that's been going on, it doesn't look very presidential for Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, my problem with this entire conversation and the narrative that's happening around here is that this picture is old. And yes, it's not that old, but this picture was taken in 2017 where Cyril went to go visit the king for whatever it is that they were going to go talk about. So this is an old image. But of course, like with everything else, who cares about the truth when this narrative is much more interesting? No one cares that this picture is old and that it's got nothing to do with what people are talking about. The fact that people already had these feelings and this view around Cyril and the king, especially when it comes to this trust, this picture just helps them push their narrative and it just helps them explain what it is that they were feeling. This picture helps them in that way. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this, is that I am at the point where I feel like any type of discussion that we have has to be honest, and whatever critique we have has to be honest. And in this particular instance, it's not honest, especially when we're tying it to this picture, to the point where people aren't even acknowledging the fact that it's an old picture, but whatever views that they've had before, they're basically tying it to this picture just to make their point. Now, the spokesperson of the president has basically come out to say that the president is outraged by the insinuation that has been made by this image, and I can see why. Like I said before, the KZN is a very important part of the ANC in terms of votes, and because we're going into elections next year and you add all of these different things together. But in the process of not upsetting KZN, the ANC doesn't also want to come across as weak. They want to come across as a party who is strong and who is basically making their own decision and is not being dictated to them. Because everything leading up until this point of what the president has done, going to go speak to him, making all these comments that nothing is going to happen to the land that's in the trust, to the public it just looks like he's groveling, he's scared, and he's desperate. But I truly think that the reason why the president did this is to kind of bring the conversation back to what I think they intended it to be when talking about land, is to basically say that beneficiaries of land under colonialism and apartheid, that land, think that's the one that they're saying that needs to be distributed without compensation. And of course, with the issue of the trust, he had to go and clarify as a way to kind of bring back people to talk about what I think they want the core focus to be. Unfortunately, that message got completely lost, and this is the one they stuck with now. To have the image of the Republican sovereignty bowing before the king, there's no way of explaining that and saving that. Now, when Cyril was in Saudi Arabia this week, he took the time to further clarify the picture again, to basically say that when he was kneeling before the king, he was just showing him his book of cattle, which The point is, I think at this point, no amount of explaining is going to make this better. The optics look weird, the optics look crazy, and no amount of explaining is going to make this better. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the story of Mosiuoa crying. Now, when I first heard about this story, I saw it on social media, and when I saw it, I saw basically stills of the video where it's very clear that he's crying, and the headlines and the conversations around this image was about how Tara is crying because he's upset on behalf of white people. You know, he's upset that land is going to be taken from white people, and you know, he feels very bad and he thinks it's incredibly wrong because white people didn't steal the land, and that's why he's crying. Now, like I said before, the issue is everyone took this and the various headlines went to social media, and that was the story. That became the story of what these images represented, and no one cared about anything else that was going on. Well, I went looking, and the fact of the matter is that it's not true. Well, let me not say it's not true. It's more like it's incomplete. The reason why Mosiuoa was crying is because of this.
Kofi wa makomrade. Yabona la Epitoli. Many of our young people were hungry.
Need some water?
Let me cook some water.
So, you know, abantwana siba-recruiter.
So, 1990 declared I was starting high school.
No, you see, the thing I find so sad is that we faced death. We lost some of the best human beings. You know, we have all these little kids.
Now, from this video, I can completely understand where he's coming from. I mean, if you think about this country and what apartheid really did, and the trauma and the pain and the hurt that still runs deep to this day with people not really getting the necessary healing, I can understand why he's emotional. I can understand why a lot of people are still emotional, because it's still a deep, deep, painful thing. There's so much of our history that we don't know. Lots of lives were lost. People still to this very day don't know where their family members are. So I can understand why it's emotional recalling what apartheid cost and the lives that were lost because of it. Now, my issue here is that I don't understand how people were getting it so wrong. I don't understand how, when the images came and people decided to go with the story, this is what they had, that he's crying for white people and that he's sad about the land. That's not what happened, and I don't understand how people got it so incredibly wrong. So the reason why I said that it's not that it's wrong but that it's incomplete is that he did actually have comments about white people and land ownership, and this is what he said. He was basically saying that he doesn't think that it's right to say white people who own land in this country stole it. He's basically saying that white people who have land in this country bought and paid for it, and if the government wants it, they need to pay them back. He also mentioned that, you know, if you go to any white person who owns land and you ask them for a title deed, they'll be able to provide it proving that they've bought this land. Now, the reason why people will have problems with this particular comment and not everything else is because of the fact that when people think about land in this country, just some of the conversations I've had with people and just some of the things that people are saying, people are talking about that when historically people acquired land, when historically white people acquired land, it wasn't because of fair trade. It wasn't that they showed up and they said, hi, thank you so much, you know, I really like your land, here's this for that. History has shown us this. History has proven, and even some of the laws that were written in this country, some of the apartheid laws, they prove that the way land was set up and how it was taken from people who lived in a particular land wasn't entirely fair. I mean, laws and things were written to basically say, if you lived in a particular area, we're just going to kick you out and now we're going to take over this area. I think that's the point and the argument that people are making, that historically, the way land has been and how it's been passed down, think people are looking at the historical part of it and how it, people who were historically oppressed were prevented from owning land, or that the land that was theirs was forcibly taken from them without compensation. I think the point here is it's about restoration and trying to right the wrong. Now, I, for one, am not going to stand here and say I know what the answer is when it comes to this whole debate and issue around land, but what I think we need to focus on is to have honest conversation around this, honest dialogue, and to basically look at the makeup of our history and look at where we come from and be honest to say, you know what, yes, the way things were done back then were not right, so how are we going to fix it? The other thing that I want to talk about what Mosiuoa said is this. He basically was making the comments that the ANC government really has, allowed for an influx of foreigners into South Africa, and they've been doing this at the detriment of South African citizens. To drive his point home, he basically said that during apartheid, when ANC members were in exiles in different countries, they were kept in refugee camps and that they weren't allowed to occupy the cities and basically push the citizens out, which I think is his way of saying that since, we have no refugee camps, immigrants come into this country, they occupy the cities and they push citizens out. I think it's also important to note that just because something is done, or that it was done, or that there are various countries who do that, doesn't mean that it's right, or that it's the thing to do, or that it makes any sense. But to be quite honest, I am not surprised that Mosiuoa Lekota would feel this way. I'm really not. I really, really am not. In the same way that I'm not surprised that Herman Mashaba feels the way that he feels about immigrants either. Not surprised. Next, I want to talk about Julius Malema and some of the comments that he's been making in this week. Now, in my previous Status of the Nation video, I talked about how there was a lot of drama around SARS and Tom Moyane and the inquiry that's going on, and how somewhere in all of that, Jacques Pau, who's the author of The President's Keeper, and Julius Malema halfway went at it, where Jacques Pau was basically saying that Julius was taking money, or had gotten money rather, from cigarette smugglers. Now, since then, Julius Malema has been interviewed on SABC, and he had a couple of comments to make surrounding this whole issue.
In 2014, Mazotti, we announced that he donated 200,000. When we were asked to pay 600,000, I was fired from work. I didn't have money. Floyd didn't have money. We were forming a party. We called for everybody to come and contribute. Mazotti came with 200,000. We put it on record in public. If this government was not requiring money to register political parties, Mazotti would not have paid the money. So where did they expect us to get the money from? They are disappointed. We are here and we are troubling them. And they are blaming Mazotti for having contributed that money. But had it not been Mazotti and all others who donated to register the EFF, will not have EFF in parliament, will still have Zuma as a president. Thanks to Mazotti and those who helped us to form this organization. It's not a secret.
Now, here's the problem I have with the comments that Julius made about Mazotti giving him money. This idea that, oh, poor us, no one wanted to give us money, and where we were going to get money to register this party, and, it's because of him that we have this money. It's ridiculous to me that they want us to believe that getting money from Mazotti is a necessary evil and that it's okay. It justifies what it is that they were trying to do.
To declare money as a proceeds of crime, we can't have any Tom, Dick and Harry moving around the corridors of bathrooms and declaring money to be proceeds of crime. It has to be a court. So white supremacy, that's how it works. It equates itself to the court of law, and once it has made judgment about you, it's final. This Mazotti money has never been taken to court and been found guilty to be proceeds of crime. And I'm on record saying, if it was to be declared as proceeds of crime, the EFF will be more than willing to return that money.
And it's interesting to me that he says that, no one has ever proved that that money was from criminal gains and, only a court can decide that. The reason why it's interesting is that in 2014, Mazotti actually confirmed to say it's true. He had been complicit in illegal dealings, tax evasions, money laundering, all of those things. So now what?
But where was the EFF going to get money at that time? You needed brave people who were not scared of the system. Anyone who had donated money to the EFF at that time would have been isolated.
And like I said, the idea that, they were so desperate for money and that's why they took the money. So now we're shifting goalposts. So we're basically saying that if you're going to take money from a criminal, it needs to be because you absolutely need the money and no one else was going to give you the money. Then it's fine. Then you can take money from someone who's corrupt and someone who's a criminal. Sure, no problem. And I almost feel like this is why people will get to the point of saying that they feel that the EFF are hypocrites, because it's okay when it's them. When it's everyone else, it doesn't work. And the justifications must just be things that people take and they accept it and it's just fine. And the idea that the level of discourse is to say, well, at least they told us, at least they were upfront about it, that makes it okay. I'm completely confused. And it's funny because you have people who have presented themselves as fighters against corruption, taking money from corrupt people, and their justification is so weak about it. Like, that's the part that I'm struggling with. He also had very interesting things to say about the economy and the finances of EFF members, you know, about their households and their cars and that type of thing.
People know their politicians. They know us. They know what we do. We live with them. We live amongst them. They know what we drive. They know where we stay. We never said anywhere in our manifesto, elect us into parliament, we'll stay in Alexander. So our people know. They elected us knowing that our houses were taken in Sandton. They still elected us to parliament. So it's not like we're misleading them and telling them that we stay in Elias Motsoaledi in Kliptown. No, they know who we exist for, but we cannot have an intellectual debate looking at who's dressed what. I've always said I can have Tokyo Sowale as my president. I have now a billionaire as my president. I can have Patrice as my president. What matters to me is political will, is whether they've got the will and the heart to change the things for the better, particularly for poor people.
And it's interesting to me, again, for him to say that, you know, he has no issue, you know, with having a billionaire as a president, whatever, when a couple of months ago, he had no problem telling all of us how much one of Cyril Ramaphosa's cows cost and how that money could basically be used, you know, to save the poor and to feed the poor. But when it comes to his house and his car, it's a conversation of, well, look, my people know where I live and they know that, you know, if there are followers of ours, then what? Like, am I the only person who sees what the problem is here? Like, I don't understand. My bottom line here is that I think it's important for people to actually pay attention to what it is politicians say. Regardless of what party they're from, it's very, very important that we actually listen to some of the things that they're saying. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about while wrapping up some of the weird optics and some of the narratives that have been pushed out there is Duduzane Zuma. Now, this week he was set to appear in court. Well, he actually did appear in court to answer for a case that has been brought against him by AfriForum. Now, my feelings and opinions of AfriForum are well documented. They are, and we can take this time, you know, to basically talk about how we think that the AfriForum is doing this for political reasons and they're doing this, you know, for their own gain and that they don't care about justice. We can have all of those conversations every single day. It's not a problem. But that's not what I want to talk about now. So this case basically relates to a culpable homicide case that happened in 2014 where Duduzane was speeding, I think somewhere in Sandton, in a Porsche, I think, and in his speeding and reckless driving, he bumped into a taxi and 2 people died because of it. Now, when this happened in 2014, NPA basically decided that they were not going to prosecute him. I think they were saying something like there isn't sufficient evidence to basically prosecute. Now, what was interesting is that the NPA declined to prosecute, even though a Randburg magistrate basically said that Duduzane was being negligent and that his actions led to the death of those 2 people. But the NPA decided that they weren't going to go ahead with it, and that is why AfriForum basically took it on as private prosecution. Now, all of that aside, when Duduzane Zuma went to court, he appeared in court and there were shackles around his feet. As expected, that is exactly how social media and everyone else basically took those images and ran with this, where they basically were doing a comparison to say, look at how he's being treated compared to, you know, white criminals who do all sorts of things. When they get brought into court, you know, they're not treated like this, and so on and so on. So basically the narrative shifted from the real reason why he was there to say that in 2014, 2 people died because he was reckless. That's the point here. And for me, I feel like in all of this, the whole point got lost. Like, the main focus got lost. And like I said before, you know, we can talk about whether AfriForum really cares about justice or if they're doing this for political, but the point is something happened in 2014 and no one was held accountable for it, and for me that should be the point. Now what makes this even more interesting for me is that I think Duduzane, played up the optics, if you will, because if you read the statements from his lawyers and everyone else, he was the one who insisted that he be shackled and making comments that it will give him street cred. So to me, I think he knew exactly what this was going to do when the pictures and the images went out, is that would be the focus and not everything else. So I can see why he would do it. And the last thing that I'll say about Duduzane is that what is it called? Hold on. Black first, land first. Interesting. They need to chill. They definitely need to chill out, and that's all I'm gonna say on that. Yeah guys, that is it on the status of the nation. Thank you for tuning in. Please sound off in the comments below and let me know what you guys think. And like I said, I hope we move our discussions and debates to a point where we can be honest in our critique and we can critique things for what they actually are and not what they appear to be. Anyway, thank you guys for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye.